Okay, we're back.
We're back. We have a special guest.
Hi, Glenn.
Hello. Not just a special guest. This is the third time I'm on.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's been on more than I?
Are there
'Cause if
any
there
other
has, I might have them.
homosexuals who have frequented this podcast more than you? That's a good
Correct.
question.
Patrick Sandberg's done like maybe 5. Amber Frost has done a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan
Fuck both of
Allegretto. You're
I'm gonna-
making your way, though.
Yeah.
All right.
You have
I
to
want
run
at
them
least
off the
like
road.
best friend of the pod status. Can I have that?
Definitely.
Yeah, totally.
Our
You
gay,
got it.
gay dad.
Yeah. Nah.
I mean, just so the audience knows what really happened is that I've been harassed by both of them for months.
We've been begging and
Yeah.
begging.
Back on, friends of mine had actually begun suggesting that I consider restraining orders. I was just like, you know what? Let me just go and fucking do this shit and get it
I
over with.
threatened to show my tits, and he was like, "No, please, I'll Venmo you."
What time?
We-
I have any time available.
We want to know what's going on in Brazil, you know?
Yeah.
We're
You guys are so fascinated by Brazilian politics that
I've got the bug for it. It's all I think about, and I just
yeah. So what's up?
not much. I was sick, and now I'm better.
Yeah.
Not with COVID.
She's
for the
infecting the whole
record.
family with COVID. Glenn, I have a question for you about Brazil.
Ooh.
What's the most like grotesque plastic surgery procedure you've seen in Brazil?
Well, there was actually an article in the New York Times this week about how the most dangerous procedure is the most popular one, which is butt lifting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the
And
BBL.
lots of women, are actually dying from it. And there was this one really notorious doctor. He was called Dr. Bum Bum. I don't know why he was labeled that, because he was like killing all these women, and they gave him this like really endearing nickname. It like really didn't go with it. It would be like if you called some serial killer like some cute, charming nickname. But anyway, Dr. Bum Bum, it was discovered, even though he was like one of the most popular surgeons in Rio, was not even licensed to be a doctor, and had like been responsible for the death of I think like 12 women before he was finally caught. It's not funny. I don't know why I'm giggling.
No.
That's
but
horrible,
This
but-
show warps your moral
More
framework.
like Dr. Bum Bum Bum.
I asked because I saw like a caravan, like a photo on Twitter. It was like a caravan of women in wheelchairs who had just gotten back from Brazil, and it was like JFK or Newark or something, and they all had the ass surgery.
What is it? It makes your butt bigger?
I think it lifts it and then makes it bigger. So like if it's sagging at all, it like all makes it go up. Because like the aesthetic here in Brazil, like in a lot of Latin countries, is that emaciated women like yourselves are sickly and undesirable, and you need like the enormous ass and like the enormous breasts.
Yeah.
So like the women who don't have that feel like they need it, and I guess are willing to risk their lives in order to get it, which is kind of depressing. Like I was actually talking to a friend about the whole trans debate and how like a lot of 17-year-olds and even 18-year-olds are having surgeries that are very, very difficult surgeries, and he was saying it was kind of a good point. Like, why is there all this obsession on the mutilation aspect of some of these gender reassignment surgeries when there's the plastic surgery industry is so much bigger, right? And so many people are being incentivized for profit reasons to like alter their bodies in pretty significant ways now.
Yeah. Well, I'm like a plastic surgery and cosmetic fillers truther, and I agree with you. I think that like just any sort of intervention like that is like the repercussions are.
Well, get back to me in 10
Yeah.
years, and it's so easy. All my
You
friends
look
are
great,
like,
Glenn.
You look great. I want to know. Well, I do want to pry from your cold, dead hands what
He
your
has
skin
he has
routine is,
fillers.
because your skin looks great, and he won't give
Anna,
up the
he
goods.
has fillers.
Excuse me, Dasha? How dare you? This is
Just a
all
little
natural.
tasteful. It's okay.
Exactly, just a little around the edges. No, I'm a big,
Destigmatized.
I just find it so funny. I can't tell you how many people I know who in their late 20s and early 30s were always so indignant about the idea that anyone would undergo plastic surgery for any reason. And then they hit 36 or 37, and then they start begging for the numbers of your favorite doctors.
I'm not against plastic surgery. I'm just a truther in the sense that it has like horrible medical and psychiatric ramifications, but I would still do it. I'm not like one of those who's like But your
Yeah,
skin.
so you acknowledge that you're headed toward
that I'm a
it
hypocrite.
shortly.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna go blonde when I'm 40, like every fucking Armenian woman. But I'm saying
Ooh.
the quality of your skin, it looks beautiful. You look like you just gave birth. You're like glowing.
Yeah, I actually do have an excellent skincare regimen, and I do feel like if I reveal it, the power of it will be
I see.
eroded.
Right.
So it's kind of like a guarded family recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like a Dorian Gray situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't let us see. So, well, you're here today to talk about. We've got like a varied and plentiful docket.
Can we, before we get to like the docket, which is a word that I've only learned from YouTube because I'm like such a podcast simp now, about that tweet that I posted like 6 months ago. I actually had forgotten about it until today when I was realizing I was going to be on your show. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was just talking to someone on Twitter like very casually, and they brought up Red Scare. Then I said, if I were straight, I would have Anna and Dasha fight to the death. Then I would marry the survivor,
Yeah.
the one who survived.
People got upset about that.
People got okay. The funniest thing is like I did put it in replies, and I kind of knew that like there was a 50-50 chance that people would find it and it would upset them, but I didn't really anticipate the extent to which it upset people. Like people found it like very disturbing, and then the funniest part was Brazil left Twitter found it and was even angrier about it because I guess it just translated poorly. And then people started coming and like defending me and saying, come on, he's just joking. And then I was like, no, actually I'm not. That is in fact how I would choose my wife if I were actually straight. I would only be Anna and Dasha. And I can't think of a more just or fair way to
pick
choose which one of them has the privilege than who demonstrates the desire to be my bride.
Well, do you think you'd be a good husband?
Well, if you actually have proven your love for me by murdering the other, I think that would be a good start.
Dasha,
Yeah,
you can have him because I don't want to take care of all those dogs.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do. I love all those puppies. I'd run around. I would live in the doghouse with the dogs. I'd be a great wife for you.
Spiritually in the doghouse forever. But Glenn, this is why you're gay, because your view of being betrothed to a woman is like making them fight to the death.
So much drama.
I know
Glenn.
there's no courtship on my end at all. I would just like throw the two of you into like some kind of an arena, sell tickets, pay-per-view licenses.
Just like pure misogyny.
We're modern women. We need to know what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
But it just didn't make it into my framework. I think that's why I upset people so much, even though they did know it was a joke, is because there still is such like intense and vicious lurking misogyny in the vision. I think like even people who assumed I was joking were still nonetheless upset.
Yeah. They saw right through your charade and saw you for the.
I don't know. I felt like it was very complimentary. I was saying like these are the two women who would be at the top of my matrimony list.
Compliment accepted.
Yeah, I'm flattered.
Yeah.
Even though one of you would end up dead at the end, I feel like it would still be an honor.
Well, that's okay.
Like,
everybody has to die sometime.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think Anna would win if your heart was really in it.
If my heart's not in it though, because I'm a pacifist. But I do have a more developed upper body, and I did pull a kid out of my own pussy, so I'm probably
You just seem tougher, stronger.
I know whenever Dasha talks about why she doesn't go to protest, she always like highlights her faint and dainty wrists. Like you have very thin wrists, so I think that would be a disadvantage.
But I think all Russian women have like the Eastern equivalent of retard strength, which is Chernobyl strength. Like you're so irradiated that you have like reserves of strength.
Yeah, I have a lot of
you.
adrenaline, but I do have the bones of like a bird.
So maybe the condition for my coming on the next time, when you spend the next like 2 or 3 months harassing me to come back on, will be that you at least like give a little glimpse of what that would look like.
So maybe
like
a
mud wrestling?
wet t-shirt contest.
But you've been
Slap each
going
other
to the
around.
gym, right?
I've been going to the gym a lot. Yeah.
Sounds like a threat.
I'm in the best shape of my life, but all
Really?
lower body, because I'm
Yeah.
trying to conform to the beauty standards
Yeah.
of having a huge ass.
Right, but you would not go to like a Dr. Bum Bum.
No, that's too big. I don't want to get too strong. because my power is my weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, your daintiness. Exactly.
It's paradoxical, but it works for
Dasha
me.
the stallion. And just like a huge fake ass. Those asses also always look bad because they look like a spice rack. Like you can balance like a dinner service on them.
It can probably be done well and you wouldn't notice, but you can always kind of tell. I just like a natural bod.
Me too.
I think I don't know, for me, like I think when guys start devoting too much effort to trying to look good, it becomes too, I don't know, it's kind of like a turn off. And especially if they just look like they put too much effort into it, if everything is just like primped and plucked and I think the same thing from women, like it just, there's no like organic beauty to it any longer. Just because, oh, by the way, do you know that they have now, I just thought like in case any of your listeners are interested, I discovered recently that there's a clinic in San Francisco that had originally done gender reassignment surgeries, and now for people who don't identify as any gender at all, they remove all sex organs and allow you to live like a plastic doll,
like a
genital-free plastic doll. Yes.
What's that called? Nullification.
Yeah,
we've heard about
nullification,
this.
exactly.
Yeah.
And they even have like before and after pictures in case you want to see those.
That should be illegal.
That should be illegal.
Think?
Yeah, to like shave.
I honestly
off your
don't
genitals.
understand how that's consistent with the Hippocratic Oath. That seems because I mean, I don't believe that there are legitimate medical diagnoses that say that there's a dysphoria that demands that you remove all human genitalia and live like just have like two tiny little holes for purely functional.
With like a weird fetish piercing, it's like you have too much time on your hand. Just like binge watch like a HBO Prestige show or something. You don't have to like.
I'm sorry, but I know you guys don't understand this, but as a member of the LGBT community, I feel a duty. It's a duty on my part to know all the latest developments in my subculture.
Yeah,
I'm bi-curious, so
So you're under the clear flag.
I just look like a man, so I need some facial feminization surgery.
Yeah, I'm a nympho, so so I actually do need to be nullified because not getting fucked is causing me so much agony.
So do you want to do the docket as we say in the podcast world?
Yeah.
I was gonna segue into...
What should we tackle first?
Well, I was going to segue into Hasan Piker because you said how unattractive it was for men to be overly preoccupied with their vanity.
But
By
it's
the way,
so attractive to buy a $3 million home in West Hollywood.
Yeah. Yes, boo.
Yeah, well, first of all, it is interesting because that is a good example of exactly what I was talking about, of someone who does have like the raw materials to be attractive, but through like just endless narcissistic, like a focus on their own body has just become
grotesque.
Kind of plasticized. Yeah, or grotesque, if you will.
Okay, I have the dissenting take on this, as always. I've never found this man hot. I mean, you know my views on him. I feel like he has some Topshop ass style, and he has that squinty, low IQ gaze of like George W. Bush. Like
That's
he looks
hot
very
to me.
simian.
I think that's attractive.
And his pants are too tight.
Well, that's for sure.
Well, also, you know what also bothers me about him is not just that you'd always be aware that he's genetically related to Cenk Uygur, who's physically repulsive and repulsive on all levels. Cenk Uygur, but that his entire career was dependent upon his uncle. And just the fact that like if Cenk were like his cousin or his brother, I could maybe digest it more, but the fact that Cenk is his uncle, which is just such a creepy relationship always. I don't know. I just don't like people who like you'd like to see Cenk and
No. Cenk reminds me of he looks like Reza Farahàn from Shaws of Sunset, but that's just how Middle Eastern people roll. They put their like little cousins into everything.
I guess. I don't know. I just don't like guys who haven't made their own path in the world.
Yeah. But that said, I just want to say Hasan has done nothing wrong, because I feel like I have to like give
by
credit
buying
where
a house?
it's due. Yeah.
Of course not.
And you know, like even though he's like not my favorite person in the world, like the people piling on him are so full of shit. as if like
they are full of shit. But let me ask you this: like, I barely have enough interest in this question to even like move my mouth in order to ask it, but I nonetheless will, since you guys raised it first.
Yeah.
Like, I do think, just as a general principle, that if you're going to have a politics where you espouse values for other people, even though I absolutely understand that if you're a socialist, what you're really saying is that the economic system in which you're living, a capitalist system, should be dismantled, and it doesn't require you to take a vow of poverty, because if you do that, it doesn't actually advance the ultimate cause of transforming the system.
Right.
It's kind of just performative. At the same time, I do think there has to be, if there's going to be an authenticity to your politics, and you're not going to be just waving banners for branding or self-esteem, that you make an effort to incorporate those values that you're trying to impose on others into your actual life. And I don't know, I mean, what if he bought like a $30 million house? Or what if he bought like a $100 million private island? Like, is there no inconsistency between extreme consumption way above what people actually need and claiming that you believe in a scheme of socialist values where material goods should be distributed based on need? I don't know. I'm not...
He actually did put in an offer on Epstein Island, but he was rejected because his credit was bad. No, you're right. You bring up a good point, because it's a slippery slope. Like, okay, 2.7 million or whatever his house was.
It's not that much.
It's not that much, especially for WeHo.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, he did nothing wrong. The only thing he's really guilty of is like having bad taste, I guess. And
being a class traitor,
Yeah.
I guess, or
he should join the
compromising
Taliban.
his.
He could learn
I mean,
a
I
thing or
don't
two from them.
know. I just, at some point, like, you have to demonstrate that your politics is something other than, you know, a product that you're selling and monetizing.
You think he should redistribute his wealth?
Or, you know, be less consumptive and use his excess money for
political purposes,
helping others. Yeah.
Less ostentatious, for sure. I hear that.
Yeah, and I don't begrudge what he did, but it does start to make me question on some level how actually committed he is to the vision that he lays out, that he says is his like animating political force.
Well, like, I mean, I think we can all be flippant and say like not at all, and he's just a brand and it's bullshit. But I feel like people really in their minds believe that they're committed, and it functionally are not, and they're just like kind of kicking the can down the road, borrowing against their future for a time when they will change and be fully committed, you know? But it never happens because like you get absorbed in the amenities and luxuries of today. I have a good solution for this. He should just turn his house into a Chaz and put up some Antifa and anarchists. Like, I think he probably believes, right?
Right. Well, but like, okay, but like, that's actually like even a better example than saying like he should have bought like a $500,000 house and then donated the like $2.5 million to poor people, which is, you know, we all do find alienating when, say, like kind of Upper West Side liberals who love to wallow in this kind of egalitarian rhetoric or this rhetoric of compassion, then turn around and scream and yell and hire lawyers to go to zoning board meetings to demand that a homeless shelter not be put on their street, right? Like, there is a radical inconsistency between that behavior and the values that they claim that they're committed to. So all I'm saying is, like, it's not necessarily the case that every socialist has to, like, live in a small house, but there does come a
tiny
point,
house.
Yeah, a tiny house, but we're a collectivist, you know, like, kibbutz.
Yeah.
But there does come a point where there is an inconsistency in the way. I think we have, you know, lost the notion that someone is, that the true worth of a person, their true value system is determined by how they live and not the things they claim they believe. You know, like, it's so easy to put BLM hashtags in your Twitter bio, but whether you actually believe in racial equality and the extent to which you're committed to eliminating racism ultimately will be determined by how you live your life. And, you know, I just think social media in particular has fostered this idea that these really superficial and empty gestures are more important than how someone is living.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the things that really determine the value and character of a person are fundamentally invisible.
I mean, I walked on my way over here today. I walked past like a mirror that someone had put up in Chinatown that said "Solidarity, Stop Asian Hate," like for people to take selfies in it. And I was like, wow, this is a perfect literal reflection of what people's politics are.
And you want to tell people where they can see the selfie that you took and posted?
It's on my Instagram at @dash_cam on my story. I looked great today, so it was
yeah. You look very cute. I like your Edwardian
so it was like
blouse.
something you did for the public.
Yeah,
and stop Asian hate. I do live that way as a anime fan.
Yeah, you personally don't.
As a hentai masturbator, I
Asian people
have the
let me
utmost
just
respect.
give like a Red Scare relevant example, which is like I was talking. Well, I was talking to Anna last week about the experience of being a parent, and what she was saying about like her experience with her baby was really beautiful. I'm not going to share it because it's not mine to share, but I'm just saying like it was this incredibly moving, sincere, just like testament. And also actually I actually also heard you on one of the last prior episodes when you were saying like how privileged you felt to be a mother to your baby.
White
and
privileged.
How just like, yes, exactly. And I did this interview yesterday with my husband with this reporter who's like doing a series on gay couples raising kids. And we were talking about like what it was like, the parenting process of what it was like, and how, like the emotions that we've gone through, like deciding to adopt, and then like the anxiety surrounding it, and then the way that like the bond is formed with our children and how they become so central to our lives. And ultimately, like I just remember thinking that the Anna that I was listening to, if you compare how organic and authentic that is, like what you're doing in your life and how you're living your life and how you're feeling and thinking, to the caricature that gets created of you because of, say, your refusal to nod to those superficial pieties, the gap between what we should be judging people by and what we do use to judge them is just so enormous. And I think closing that gap is important. And so I do think it's easy to say, yeah, sure, a socialist should be able to live this like lavish lifestyle. But like I said, I do think the principle that people should be required to live their values is it's easily dismissed.
Yeah, I mean, but this is what I'm saying. Like, it's very difficult to, like cross compare the caricature of somebody's like online persona with the way that they really are in private. And I think like, if you're one of those people, you just take the L and accept that you're going to be misunderstood on some level, because again, the things that make you kind of a valuable and worthwhile person, things like, personal obligation to your family and your friends. And I'm not even talking about like trad stuff like having kids and being married or anything like that, but just being like a good friend and a good relative. Those things are essentially invisible. Like all good deeds, like moral deeds, are invisible and they're not rewarded. And I think like you have to like accept that on some level. You're not doing them for a reward. And I think like ultimately, I think when people ask me like how is it that you can endure all the negativity that you get, I like it's actually not hard. And the reason it's not hard is because I don't think it's an accurate portrayal of who I am. And if I had concerns that it were, I would probably have a more difficult time with it. And But I also, I mean, like, but why is that? Like, why is it that we're now trained to judge people based on these meaningless, kind of vapid metrics, as opposed to trying to understand how someone is actually living their lives, which is like the true expression of someone's virtue or lack of character or whatever? Well,
because of social media sort of flattening everything into this hollow virtue signaling, ultimately. But I find I almost prefer having haters, because I think when you're heaped with like universal praise, then that's when you get like imposter syndrome and stuff. And I don't have that problem because people call me a bitch and a retard on the internet all day long.
Well, when you're heaped with universal praise, you know that people pity you.
Yeah.
On some level.
None of us have the problem of being heaped with universal praise.
No.
But I think to what you were saying, it also doesn't really, get me down because I have like a solid foundational bedrock from which like my character springs. Meaning my like actual, not the character I play on Red Scare Podcast.
Yeah.
No, but like I do think the converse is actually true and very interesting, which is like on some level that universal praise you can get. Like there have been times in my career where I had like, received more, say, like praise.
Yeah.
And just like the hate and the negativity don't really affect me. Like there was a point where I actually had to realize that when, like, if you go and speak, to like. I used to have these experiences. I would go and speak to like 5,000 people in some like auditorium. And then I would like do a book signing after, and there'd be like 500 people lined up wanting me to sign my book. And then people would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh my God, I love you. Thank you so much for my work. You've been a big influence on me." And I would get back to my hotel room and I would like feel this like extreme emptiness.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I feel so empty? Like, why do I feel so vacant when I just had all this love that people were expressing to me? And I realized it was because they weren't actually expressing love for me. They were expressing love for like my work or what I represent to them, which is extraordinarily different.
Right.
And so the hatred works the same way, right? Like if you guys tweet something or say something or represent something and people hate you for it, that almost has nothing to do with who you are.
Yeah.
And if you maintain that difference, like on both sides, I think it's much healthier.
Well, I mean, there's like a vast like ocean of like a giant chasm between what people really are and how they're perceived, of course. And, this is like disturbing. I mean, my position has always been to defend the people that are perceived in the worst light, because very often, not 10 times out of 10, but maybe 7, 8 times out of 10, they are not what they appear to be. And I feel like my personal moral duty, my obligation, otherwise I couldn't live with myself, is to defend those people, even if that comes at a personal expense or whatever.
Like Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that like the rewards of social media, where it is just true. Like we can say all we want. Oh, Twitter's not the real world, and it's just social media, and stay offline and go touch grass. Like. No matter what, the reality is the internet is an inextricably important part of our lives, and there's no escaping that, at least not without sacrificing huge amounts of options in terms of your work or your life. And what it tends to do, I think, more than anything, there's like an incentive scheme to reduce everything to a person's worst attribute or worst act or worst statement, because the more you can gin up hatred for a particular person, the more rewards you get for yourself. And I think that's actually, I have that same impulse. Like, even if someone seems like they're being vilified validly, I just, like, the mob justice component of it just repels me so much.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it's a lack of empathy. Like, not only a failure to realize that there's other parts of that person that don't warrant hatred, but also even that specific act, almost in all cases, you can look at it from different angles and at least find something empathetic about it.
Yeah, I mean, but the scary thing I think about that is not even feeling personally misrepresented or feeling like you're defending someone who is personally misrepresented. It's the like tainting negative energy of feeling the wrath of people who are not square with themselves, who are deceitful, dishonest with themselves, who are like anxious and miserable and are taking it out on you. That really freaked me out. I mean, I pulled back from social media after I had the kid because I just don't want, to taint my breast milk with like the energy of the haters. I'm being toxic. Like dramatic and hyperbolic, but
it does it obviously takes a toll.
Yeah. Like I don't want to, like after I had this kid, I don't want to read, like endless threads psychoanalyzing me and how I'm like whatever, like a bitch or deceitful or, because it's like so far from the truth. And I think it's also like, just speaking only for myself, like it's a kind of injustice against my kid for me to even partake in that.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, it's funny. I people always claim I'm angry online. And the funny thing is I'm almost never angry online. And my therapist says that I use Twitter like a video game. And so like when she said that, I started watching how my husband and my kids who play video games incessantly and while making me nauseous for doing so. So I tried to like, I usually just avoid them. So I started paying more attention. And it is so true. Like, shit just pops up on the screen and they're like, oh, that's who we have to go and destroy. And then they like blow it up and they have so much fun doing it. It's just like kind of a diversion.
Yeah.
So
it's gamified
like,
for you.
Yeah. It's just gamified. It's funny. I like almost never am not laughing.
Yeah.
Online, even when I'm like disseminating the most vicious insults. In fact, especially then.
Well, yeah.
So maybe it's not like the healthiest thing in the world because the people with whom you're interacting are actually human beings. And for the moment, as Dasha said, you're gamifying them. You're seeing like the pixelated version of them.
And you're dunking on them for like adrenaline rush or like a serotonin boost.
Exactly.
I mean, I do the same thing. It's really...
I feel like there are like more unhealthy ways to get those pleasures than just like spewing like fun scorn at some random stranger online.
Yeah.
Well, I think the scorn is healthy and it's okay to like shit post and act out sometimes, but sorry.
Some people deserve the scorn.
Yes, some people do.
Exactly. Exactly. There is like a righteous anger and like a disgust that is merited and healthy to expel as opposed to keep inside of you. And if you're going to pay attention to political issues and social injustices and things of that nature, you are going to get emotionally affected unless you're a sociopath, and you do need an outlet for those emotions. Mm-hmm. And holding them in can be really toxic and destructive. So finding some kind of like outlet that isn't completely malevolent and destructive, I think is crucial.
I mean, social media has driven home two facts for me. A, we're all liberals at the end of the day. And B, related to that, that part of this, again, it's like a distraction, a displacement activity for the impotence that you feel because you can't change things on the whole. Like, you know, when we were talking about Afghanistan on the last episode, I felt like a giant libtard because, I do feel a level of like pain and sadness for the women and girls of Afghanistan as much as they've become like a political pawn. But there's literally nothing I can do about it short of buying a $2.3 million home. But you know what I'm saying? Like, social media makes you aware of how crushingly impotent you are. And Glenn, as far as you're concerned, you're one of the
least impotent guys on the internet.
You've actually done something
Well, I was about to say, like, you know, I don't know. I think you guys are being a little too self-effacing. Like, I mean, my work definitely has had real outcomes, but I also think that if you're speaking to however many people you're speaking to, like, I remember back in the blogging days, early blogging days, there'd be bloggers who only had like 2,000, people a day reading their blog, and they would like kind of complain that there were much bigger bloggers. And I remember some like wise person said, being able to speak to 2,000 people, that's like a lot of people. That's a privilege.
Like
that's an opportunity to reach 2,000 people. So if you guys are talking like once a week for an hour and a half a day to tens of thousands of people, you have no idea how you're affecting those people, how you're changing the course of their lives or decision-making process or thought process. Like, you definitely are. But I think that there's like this kind of
giving them brain damage.
Yeah,
and
you
body
could be
image
fucking them
issues
up like permanently as well, and like sending them into therapy as well. That's the other side. But I do think like part of the design is to convince us of our own impotence, to make us feel like we have no power,
That's
and therefore
smart,
all we do is give up. And a lot of times I think that obscures the actual power that we have. And it also, like, it's a kind of pleasing lie, because if we really are impotent, like if you can't do anything about Afghanistan, if you can't do anything about this, if you can't do anything about that, then you're relieved of the opportunity even to try, of the responsibility even to try, right? And then you go buy your $3 million house in West Hollywood, even though you're totally not gay, and you just love... you're just the material things in life. So I think like that defeatism has to be sometimes avoided as well.
I wonder how he's going to decorate his house.
Very, very tastefully.
Yeah.
With like Jonathan Adler sculptures and vases.
Can't wait to come over.
Yeah.
For a socialist summit.
No, I mean, that's a really good point that I think also social media convinces you that you're much more impotent and powerless than you think you are. I mean, you could, at bare minimum, the talking medium does like reach lots of people.
Yeah.
I was thinking that we have to start inserting subliminal messages into our podcast. I've really gotten into sound editing.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna like throw some stuff.
Cool. A nice whisper.
Like really
a lot of people
Especially
say
when
the
you
pod
have
helps them
guests
lose
on.
weight.
Yeah, no, you guys,
that's
you
true.
You guys do provide. I do think it's important to recognize this. Like, you guys do provide something of value to people, which is why they keep listening and why people pay. I pay $5 a month or whatever it is, like, for your shitty podcast. But like, there's a reason for that, right? Because like, it gives me some kind of fulfillment and enjoyment, but also like, it's thought provoking. So like, I just like gave an example like 5 minutes ago of something Anna said that affected how I thought about something. So I just like having an impact on the world doesn't have to be these grand gestures.
Right. Well, it is small. It is small incremental gestures.
And that goes back to what we were talking about with like how you ultimately live your life. Like that's where change begins, is in the home.
Yeah.
Well, like the Michael Jackson song, not to like quote pop music, is like profound insights, but like if you want to change the world, you start with the man in the mirror. I think like that's, there's a reason why that resonates so much. It's because it is true. And that's why I know the Hasan thing, like the easy way to react to it, and the way that like I of course reacted to it was, who gives a shit? Like, what is he supposed to do? Live on the street? And it's like when Bernie had 3 homes and everybody was like, hi, he's a socialist, or AOC has a Telsa or whatever that car is, and that's supposed to prove her hypocrisy. Like, what's she supposed to do? Just like ride around in one of those like Volkswagen Bugs that like break down constantly and spit like, gross smoke everywhere. So there is like, of course, that's the easy reflexive thought to have. But the reason why I just resisted it a little bit is because I do think it is important to not make your politics like performative, and to make it, if you're not integrating those values into your life, you really don't believe them or care about them, and you're just gonna not have any power if it's contrived.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess like my message, which barely comes across in this podcast, is like, okay, like, I want especially young women and young gay guys to feel like they should know that they have all of the value within them, that they have already have everything in them to succeed, whatever their definition of success is, as liberal as that sounds. And it depends really on self-respect and self-reliance, and always being honest with yourself and others in private, and not expecting rewards to come your way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have this assistant. He's 22. He just graduated from Vassar. He loves Brazil and Rio for all the right reasons. And so, including the fact that, if you're a young homo, there's just no better place to be than Rio. So he's here. He's come here a couple times before he started working with me. Now he's here for, the next 6 months to work with me, but also just to be here. And when he found out I was doing your show, of course, needs to say, he's a 22-year-old homo from Vassar. He's a huge Red Scare fan. Yeah. So it was like, oh my God, please, just tell me what time. All I want to do is just come by and, say hello to them. You're so meaningful to him. And I was just like, okay, fucking come. I don't care. It's even though, we're doing this on a Saturday.
Where is he?
But I don't know. He's going to be here. He's going to, flint in any moment. He's going to, just, be trying being in the background, all hiding and, embarrassed. But, you're going to hear, the wisps of, his movement.
He's going to tiptoe in here.
He's going to, be ferrying in any moment. But, yeah, I think that having that importance for somebody, which you have for a lot of, sinister homos and misogynistic women, should preclude you from claiming that you're impotent.
That's sweet.
Yeah, that's very nice of you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Where are the dogs?
They're chilling out on the bed, and we just moved into this new house, so only half the pack is here. The other half is still in the old house.
Is that the euthanasia shelter? The glue factory?
No. We have the new house, and we have the old house where the dogs are, and then we have the shelter where they're Huge number of dollars. No, but like, you know, actually now that I'm thinking about it, like this does connect to something else we were going to talk about that you guys put on the docket, which is like the whole current affairs thing, the whole Nathan Robinson.
I mean, we don't have to talk about it, but.
Well, no, I just want to briefly like say something about that. Okay. So do you guys want to like quickly tell the story for those who are very blessed and forhturnate not to know about it?
I have literally no idea what happened. Just kidding. But
Current Affairs, which is a leftist magazine no one reads, run by a man named Nathan J. Robinson with a very small staff of like 4 to 5 women and non-binaries of color.
That's the whole point. There was no they didn't have anybody of color.
They're all non-binary, but they're all white.
They're all white?
Yes, they're all white but non-binary.
Wait, Lita Gold is white?
She's Jewish, I think.
She's Jewish.
You guys, I had the best show idea that was like inspired by the White Lotus. Mm-hmm. It's a history of Barack Obama's life, and it's called the White Lotus. Just kidding.
That's a good one.
There has like a show that's like the White Lotus, but about a leftist newsroom that implodes in internecine warfare.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing is, like, when you finally did, I'm gonna let you go in just a second, Dasha. I don't mean to sound like
no.
But like, what happened was when I finally did agree to come on the show after you guys were like badgering and coercing and harassing me and stalking me, I like said, yeah, you know what? Actually, I do want to come on the show to talk about the White Lotus. And then you guys were like, great, sounds great. And then you like sent me the docket, as we say in the podcast world, and it's like, this is what we want to talk about: Nathan Robinson, current affairs, Brittany. Hasan's house, 4 more things, and then maybe if we have time with the White Lotus.
We can talk about the White Lotus.
No, but I want to I do have a point about the Nathan J. Robinson thing, and I also want to hear you like do the preparation because you do very little preparation. So the little that you do, I want to have actually have value. So go ahead and tell the listeners about what happened with Nathan Robinson.
His employees tried to reorganize the magazine as a co-op and he fired all of them, and then Lita Gold wrote a thing on Twitter about what had happened, and then he responded, and it gets, I guess, ostensibly more complicated
and grotesque.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's lots of blurry screenshots that no one can read and emails flying around.
Lots of talk about workplaces and organizing. As I told our group chat, it's not a workplace, it's a WordPress, it's somebody's personal blog. Like, I don't think it's subject to the normal, ordinary processes of...
Well, it's a vanity project financed by Nathan J. Robinson's parents.
Yeah.
And he was living up to his socialist principles by paying everyone the same salary, but he wanted to retain very small, paltry, and he wanted to retain editorial control, which he claims was being compromised by like some business managers and stuff that he had hired.
He wanted to hire a woman of color editor, and the staffers...
I can't tell if you're doing a bit or not.
No, I'm not doing a bit.
This was the funniest thing. So like when the workers rose up, when the workers of the world united and rose up to denounce him as though he were like this rapacious capitalist, like some kind of unholy love child of like Jeff Bezos and Gordon Gekko, even though he's like this like tea deprived, you know, like wisp of a win kind of person who, as you say, was paying himself $45,000, the same amount as every other employee. So kind of like purposely living up to the values, which is like very commendable on one level, like we were just talking about.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so when they were like decided to like raise their fist in the air and say like he's this, you know, evil boss who had
fat cat.
imposed this like this fat cat, like the symbol of you know, like climate destroying oligarchical rule, he in his statement back basically implied that they were all racist, claiming that the reason that they got angry at him is because he was demanding that they finally hire a woman of color and they only wanted to hire this other white woman instead. So I just thought the whole thing was such a funny glimpse into like the complete self-immolating insanity of leftist culture. Like, but it goes to what we were just talking about. That's why I wanted to just briefly mention it, because like this is happening so often. You know, there was like that Dianne Morales campaign. They were like in 8th place in the New York mayoral race. And the workers, like 2 weeks before the election, decided that it was time to unionize and like protest her while she was trying to fucking become mayor of a city of 8 million people. And like they thought, I guess, that their like tiny little internecine HR cause was more important than subjecting 8 million people to the like rule of neoliberalism and pro-police fascism as they see it under Eric Adams or Andrew Yang. And that's so much what happens with left-wing culture. I think it comes from that sense of impotence. Like, there's no way we can stand up to Amazon or Wall Street or Silicon Valley, so we're going to take down this little nerdy dweeb who actually has this tiny little magazine and was trying to pay us all the same salary that he gets, even though he founded it, and feel like we've achieved something because we're so impotent. I think it's so like it's the way like Antifa, even though they claim that they're fighting fascism, are never anywhere near actual institutions of fascist power. Like, you never see them in Langley outside the CIA or in front of Google. They're like going and beating up like fat loser like actual Nazis.
They're like shadowing some woman who looks like Jennifer Coolidge and is wearing a MAGA hat and is clutching a Pomeranian because she was on the wrong side of the protest. But yeah, I mean, please don't make me sympathize with Nathan J. Robinson. But like I said, I'm a very honest person, so I see his side of it, and it's like so typical, of like leftist organizations to like go down in this manner. And predictably, what happens is then somebody's panhandling online, asking for Venmo donations, and they're playing the race card. And of course, there's also always the intimation then of Me Too style sexual assault language, like the creepy ex-boyfriend.
Right.
Like Lita Gold pulled that one out of the bag.
That
she
Nathan
also said
J. Robinson was harassing her.
Yeah. No, and she also said, funnily enough, that she would never publish private correspondences, and I was like, that's not how I remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows like the triviality and pettiness that they use in lieu of anything meaningful. Like, celebrating that you've destroyed current affairs and Nathan J. Robinson as some kind of blow for socialism would be like devoting yourself to crusading against toxic masculinity and then like celebrating because you got Chris Hayes taken off the air. You know, like there's no correlation between what they did and what they think they've done. It was just like they can't do anything about anyone meaningful, so they destroyed this little like wimpy guy who just happened to like work with them, and now they're all out of a job, and they destroyed one of the very few like actual socialist magazines that was sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know what's funnier, that he hired a bunch of like incompetent like Janice Soprano ass people who couldn't like brew a cup of coffee if you paid them, or that they actually trusted him to enact socialism. But the other thing is,
they were already unionized is the thing, and they wanted to restructure as a co-op.
What does that mean even?
Like
like he was no longer the person who decided who got hired or how much rent they spent or like whether an article got published or not, that they did it all like collectively, like they live on a kibbutz, which isn't even socialism.
No.
Like, socialism requires centralized power. Like, socialism believes in a government structure. There's like a leader in communist countries.
Yes.
That's like some kind of like anarcho syndicalism, where just like the whole, so they don't even understand their own ideology. And that's what I'm saying. It's just like, this is happening everywhere in leftist spaces, where they basically are like little HR functionaries, and they think that petty workplace grievances is something that they ought to pursue because it's the only thing where they can actually make a difference, is destroying other people. It's like a very hate-driven, trivial culture where putting people's heads on a pike is the only metric of achievement. It's so dreary and like alienating,
it's
and
very bleak,
self-referential. It's so fucking bleak.
Well, we're lucky they're not actually in power.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, they're not only incoherent, they're like useless. They never had any power to leverage in the first place to rise up.
Do you guys even think, I don't think they even want power. Like, I think they like always losing because they love that like repression and marginalization narrative that they get to cling to.
Yeah, that's another huge problem with the left, is they're literally addicted to losing.
Well, and then the other thing that dawned on me in the course is, I don't know who first brought up the Jeff Bezos comparison, but it's a mutually flattering one, because Nathan gets to feel more powerful than he is, more central than he is. And so did his former employees, who also get to feel like victims, terrorized by this like omnipotent digital landlord when he's like literally a guy with a WordPress.
Well, he did have like a print magazine. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. I actually found it pretty impressive. It was like aesthetically pleasing and artistically, elevated, and it was actually not a bad magazine. Like in the ecosystem of what the media is producing, I actually thought it was on the better end of the spectrum. And it's unbelievable that there was actually something so rare for a socialist, which was like a successful, like barely sustainable, not profitable, but at least like survivable socialist magazine that had a high level of editorial standards, and they destroyed it over like their petty office conflict.
Yeah.
Well,
and these are all just power plays. Like, it's done in the name of egalitarianism, but they're really like power plays. It's them demanding more decision-making power for a magazine that they didn't fucking create.
Well, yeah, I mean, Glenn, I think I pitched to them. I mean, my story with Current Affairs. I have kind of a sordid history with them, but I pitched them at the time when they were like a very promising outfit, and they published, the likes of Angela Nagel and Amber Frost and Freddie DeBoer, and it was, a roster of very good, promising young writers.
Yeah, and it was like heterodox, and like, like if you're publishing Angela Nagel and Freddie DeBoer, you're already making a statement that you're interested in like intellectually provocative writing as opposed to just obligatory leftist dogma. And they've definitely gotten away from that. And so on a lot of levels, Nathan has made his own bed, and that's so often what happens. If this were happening to any other magazine or institution, he would be the first one denouncing the downfall, like celebrating the downfall of the boss for being greedy about wanting centralized power. And this is the climate that they're all creating, and ultimately it's all going to come to eat them as well.
Right.
Damn.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to have some degree of schadenfreude while you watch it.
But I think
true.
that's also like the problem with small organizations in general. I think it's admirable and like worthwhile to have a egalitarian workplace where people are paid, the same or according to their talents and inputs, and the boss doesn't overpay himself and that sort of thing. But as far as like the creative vision is concerned, a creative vision is always essentially undemocratic. It's, I was reading
if it's a real vision,
if it's a real
if you're
vision,
not just crowdsourcing.
Yeah, and I was reading that article that you sent us about the white supremacy of the White Lotus, made by notable white supremacist Mike White. No pun intended. Even his name is white supremacist. His name is literally
white.
And they made the point that the fact that he wrote and directed every single one of the episodes was like a bad thing. They said it like it was a bad thing, and I was like, no, that's so cool.
An amazing
it's like a testament
achievement.
to this guy's like vision. Do you know how hard it is to like? I mean, you made a movie. It's so hard to translate your vision into something concrete.
No, I noticed that too. That this Refinery 29 article, about the white supremacy of the White Lotus made the point, that they tried to condemn him for not like focus grouping and outsourcing the creative aspects of that show, which is how most television is made.
And which is why it's all bad.
Yeah.
Well, and also, like, right, and implicit in it is that by making himself the writer, the director, and the executive producer, he was denying marginalized people the opportunity to share in the, like, but that was really what the fucking article was arguing. And that was, like, not even the most, like, preposterous point it made, not even probably in the top 5. But that was, so this is, like, I'm so interested I haven't talked to either of you about the White Lotus, and obviously it's relevant to Red Scare because 2 of those characters are allegedly based. I mean, clearly the intention was to make them based on you very, very loosely. But I don't think those characters really had much to do with you except in like the most superficial ways. But I don't know. What did you think about that whole
full
series?
Disclosure, Mike White is one of my best friends.
Oh, really?
No, I met him recently, but he's a huge fan of the pod, has been for a long time.
You're friends with that white nationalist? That
I'm friends.
white nationalist?
That's it. Red Scare's canceled.
With someone called him a crypto incel and creepy spiritualist. I saw on Twitter. Mike White, yeah, and he.
Gay guys be incels?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But hence crypto incel, meaning he's like paying lip service to some kind of like incel white nationalist agenda under the guise of whatever. But so I have been watching it from the beginning and knew that the characters were loosely based, or at least their like vocal inflections and frequencies were based on us. And
well, in the first episode, they're like reading Camille Paglia talking about doing ketamine.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like it couldn't have been more obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that wasn't even the dead giveaway. I may have like even messaged you to that degree, but the dead giveaway was the opening scene when they're like psychoanalyzing the passengers on the boat. It wasn't even
and
the
like,
book.
like creating their backstories and like kind of just like amusing and not very generous ways.
Yeah, that's when I believed it. And I think he literally like airlifted a direct quote that we had about Hitler, but tweaked it a little about how loves animals, hates Jews.
Oh, about Bardot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've read an interview, and I regret doing this so much, with the actress who played Olivia, which I guess like just physically at least is the blonde Dasha character.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't aware of Red Scare, and she was saying how Mike White told her to go listen to it.
Yeah.
And she listened to like 2 or 3 episodes, she said, just in order to get the inflection. And she kind of was like trashing the podcast. Like, first of all, she thought she was listening to 2 woke Gen Z representatives.
I thought she put her Gen Z spin on it. Was how I interpreted that. But yeah, she did seem to kind of implicitly distance herself from. She was like, I've never even heard of this show. I don't condone anything these girls have said.
Right. It was actually making me angry.
I only listen to get the vocal fry down.
Because since I am like the gay dad of the show, like I do have like a parental pride in the 2 of you. So when someone attacks my daughters, I get very like protective.
Thank you.
I didn't think she was like very. I think it was just like more of a distancing
Glenn, you have
thing.
to get your story straight. Are we your wives or your daughters? It's like real Afghanistan hours up in here.
That's kind of the hot part of it for me. Is it like really kind of merges?
There can only be one wife. Yeah.
But what did you think of the show?
I really, obviously, I'm incredibly biased, but I enjoyed the show a lot. Thought it was like show of the summer, whatever. It was nice to have something to look forward to watching every week, which I feel like is also increasingly rare. And it's sort of when COVID happened, I thought, and that should be talked about more, I think, about the show, is that it was specifically made during COVID. So that's why it's so contained and happened so quickly. But that was sort of what I had hoped would happen with, TV and film post-COVID, was that we would see this return to kind of like chamber dramas or like character-driven, contained stories that were smaller out of necessity, but then the quality of like the writing and stuff would have to sort of rise to the occasion. And White Lotus, I think, is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, first of all, the last time I was on your show, Anna asked me like, what is your secret vice? And I like confessed for the first time publicly that I'm a huge fan of Survivor.
Right.
And Mike White was on Survivor.
Yes.
Yeah. And not only was he on it, but he almost won. A lot of like hardcore Survivor fans think he was robbed of the title, that he was clearly the more strategic player that season. And he's also just like a huge reality TV fan in general. I think he was on like Amazing Race twice as well. Yeah. But the reason I love Survivor that I talked about the last time is the reason that he loves Survivor that I thought was very evident in White Lotus is in Survivor, because people really are playing for $1 million, it reveals what their true nature is, like how kind of like what limits they're willing to transgress and what ethical rules they think they have that they're willing to renounce in order to win the money. And what I loved about this show so much, the reason why I found it so refreshing, is because the characters, there were no like angelic characters and there were no satanic characters, right? Like there was good and bad in all of them. And it was so good to see like a show refuse to appease any of the current political pieties. Like, it was shocking that, like, the woman of color wasn't, like, the hero at the end, and that, like, you were allowed to, like, sympathize and hate every character as opposed to, like, being forced into liking one and hating another. It was just very sophisticated in that way. Like,
the essence of successful drama, I think, is an absence of like that kind of moralism that's so popular these days.
It was so unpreachy,
like top-down
but isn't
moralizing where they do like a Harrison Ford like forced voiceover that explains like, this is the heroic and virtuous black character.
Well, and also like it respected all of its characters enough to like give them each, you know, like the dignity of an argument. So even when they were sitting at like the table and there was that scene where the mother, who was like sort of the Sheryl Sandberg character, like the wealthy tech executive, was saying that she thought her son was disadvantaged in the world because he was straight and white and cis. And the girls rolled, like Anna and Dasha rolled their eyes and said like how disgusting and obnoxious it is. Like there is an extent to which it is obnoxious to say that, like when you're this incredibly rich family, like whining petulantly about the unfair obstacles that your like wealthy son faces because he's white and straight. But there is like also an element of truth to what she's saying in certain circles where that actually is like a disadvantage, which is why everyone feels compelled to claim that they're non-binary, even those guys walking around Brooklyn with like huge bushy eyebrows and like huge afro hair and like gigantic beards, and they're like, yeah, I'm non-binary.
Well,
I'm queer.
Glenn, did you see that crazy tweet about there was some census metric and it looks like the number of people who identify as Native American, as indigenous, has skyrocketed by like a magnitude of like 30% or something. And it's not right. It's not like suddenly they found a bunch of new Native American people. It's that people are now pulling a Liz Warren and identifying as Native American because it gives you certain perks and it's
to do so. Yeah.
Well, and how many like white academics got caught lying and claiming they were people of color or some other marginalized identity? Obviously, that's a currency. At least like in academia and other liberal elite circles, even if it's in a disadvantage in others. I also like thought the really interesting part of that show is that it talked like like you were supposed to obviously not like the wealthy white guests and then like sympathize more with the staff because they were like working class and there to serve and like those were like the minorities. But the reality is the money contaminated the wealthy people, but it also poisoned the staff. Like that Belinda character was like really eager to get her hands on that money and was willing to do a lot in order to get it.
Yeah.
And then the like Shane's wife at the end like decided she was gonna stay with him even though he was repelling her because I guess she made some calculation that the material goods were worth that calculation. So it made every relationship transactional and in the process like poisoned all of them.
That's very well said. Also, the girl who wrote that Refinery 29 piece is clearly such a Rachel.
So
Except she probably doesn't have the luscious honkers of Alexandra Daddario, so she can't secure a rich husband to take her away from her clickbait hell.
Was she white? The girl who wrote
probably
or like a girl in a hijab.
Sure. I'm gonna go read that article again. I enjoyed it so much. Like you guys sent it to me just 15 minutes before we began, so you only got to like
just skim it. It's a good one.
I found the show like titillating just because it reminds me of all my years as a bartender in service. No, but it reminds me of like working in service, and sure enough, there were always these kind of like rich, very needy women who wanted like you to handhold them and psychoanalyze them through their expensive Italian meal. And the kind of sinister homosexual hotel manager, that's also a type that I came across many times. So these were like very familiar types, and I think like he did basically the show was endowed with like a generosity, a largesse of spirit. It was like a gracious show that wasn't miserable or moralizing, which is like more than you can say for like the 90% of shows that are on TV right now. And I feel like he nailed that thing that good art always nails, which is that it makes you feel uncomfortable because you find yourself sympathizing with people who are repellent.
And identifying with them, like, a little more than you wish you were.
Right.
Yeah. And had he, like, compromised the integrity of that vision by pandering or crowdsourcing his creative process, all of that would have been diluted and the show would have been incoherent if they, like, wokeified it.
Or just cloying, cloying and annoying.
Yeah, exactly. If they were like, let's let a Hawaiian person write this episode, or like,
right, or like let's center the like person of color a little bit more, or make her more sympathetic. And like sometimes like the only way I find it so notable that we're like praising it for not being preachy and moralizing in that really crude way, as if that is something that even should have to be celebrated, but because it is so rare, it becomes so conspicuous. Yeah. And the only times these days like that it even becomes possible is if you just avoid anything, any kind of like political or social commentary at all, just like stay totally safe. But that's porn. What was so great is like this, or just watch porn on OnlyFans for a while you can. But this show like really delved directly into all of those like uncomfortable social and political controversies without ever like performatively taking a side,
or really naming them essentially. But it's so funny that we also are praising it on these grounds, because as if this kind of top-down moralizing is the norm, because it's not really the norm. It's a really recent development as of the last 10 years probably,
and it is in like prestige television.
Yeah, if you watch like movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, I don't watch black and white movies. There is no such kind of overbearing morality, with the exception, actually, it's funny, was it Godard who did the documentary, the Rolling Stones documentary?
I don't know.
There's it's like one of the most frustrating documentaries I've seen, because it's like Rolling Stones recording Sympathy for the Devil, but it's interspersed with like proto-woke libtard commentary and like reenactments featuring like beautiful black actors. So it's like an early kind of like pre-woke.
Yeah, well, like none of the shows that people love most, I think, could even be put on the air like now. Like there was nothing woke about The Sopranos, for instance. If anything, it was like super anti-woke. It like played on stereotypes. It had almost all white characters. I think there was one character who was gay once, who had his skull bashed in like the most violent and gruesome manner.
Vito?
Yeah, I don't remember. But wasn't there like a gay character who they like just gay bashed in like a really vicious, violent way?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like politicizing art or forcing it to adhere to orthodoxies is just the most decadent and primitive thing you can do. And this, I don't know why this show avoided it. Maybe it was because of what you were saying, Dasha, that it was just like it didn't go through all the normal.
They needed like, COVID. They needed COVID programming.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Mike wrote the show like in a very short drain of time. It was produced very quickly because they could all quarantine at that hotel and then shoot. You know, like just make it really fast. And I think maybe there will be more of that, but to the sort of the like the crushing moralism of contemporary entertainment, I think it kind of also does go back to like impotence. And when people talk about like, oh, they would never let you make a show like that, they would never, you know, let you. This is, I'm paraphrasing something Quentin Tarantino said on Bret Easton Ellis's podcast about his own movies like not being allowed to be made anymore. But the thing is that all of that is a little bit, not totally, because you know production is so expensive, but it is a little illusory. Like they can't stop you if you don't ask for permission.
Right. And who are they?
Exactly.
I mean, broadly speaking, we know it's like the executives and production companies and stuff like that, but really, who are they?
But White Lotus is inspiring, because it's like against the odds becomes this really beloved show for its virtues that aren't political.
Right. I think people are just so happy in a way to be freed from it. You know, like to be, because the minute you start hearing a show or characters on a show talk about privilege and race and all of those issues, like you're just prepared to hate it in advance because you feel like you just know it's coming, which is just like the woke truck coming to run you over, like over and over until your skull is just splattered all over the pavement. And it just never happened. There wasn't like one wrong note where it like retreated in fear.
Yeah.
And it was so refreshing, just like that part of it alone. Like I really came to trust the show that after like 1 or 2 episodes that it was just never going to do that. And I was able to let my guard down against it.
Yeah. And I think it was like an equal opportunity show in that it made fun of everybody.
Yeah. Everyone was fallible. Everyone was human. Great to see Jennifer Coolidge get a ton of screen time also.
Didn't she say she almost didn't do the show because she had like eaten so many pizzas over the quarantine that she didn't want to.
Who was that the
Tanya?
Tanya?
Yeah.
She was fucking fantastic. Like that character was so layered.
Phenomenal actress. Yeah.
Like, if you worked with her before, like seen her before?
No. I know. Well, she was in a bunch of Christopher Guest movies. That's
yeah. That's true. I forgot
She's
about that.
Like comedic actress.
Yeah, like also I like seemed like it was going to be funny, and it lured you in with thinking it was going to be funny, and then it just wasn't. And also the other thing that I really loved the most about the show is like, and I kind of see this, and then it got confirmed when I read like an interview with Meg White about the show, which is the whole like dead body device, like at the end, and it was so obvious that it was done just to be like, here, fuck you, if like you need a dead body, here it is. And it was never really relevant. Like I personally never gave a shit. I was never wondering who was going to die whenever anyone would be like, who do you think is going to die? It was like, it's so fucking irrelevant. And they basically left like 10 minutes at the end to resolve that. And that was like the least important thing of the show.
Well, actually anyone could have died and it would have been the same outcome. And the other thing that you brought up, I just binge watched the last 3 episodes last night. And I also was expecting, like, once I let my guard down and realized it was a good show and not an annoying show.
Right.
Then I kind of sunk into the fact that it was a fundamentally like witty and lightweight show. But as the show went on, it became actually very heavyweight and dark and fucked up.
Well, even though the like cinematography and the music became darker and darker and darker with each episode, you know, it was like at first it was like light music. You thought like there were these like kind of mockable characters being funny because of how obnoxious they were. There were these beautiful like ocean shots, and then it just started becoming like waves crashing against these stones and like gray overcast skies and like much heavier, darker score. And the mood by the end was kind of like you just wanted to get the fuck out of there so badly.
Yeah.
Which is weird, right? That's kind of hard to do. It's just like this beautiful Hawaiian resort.
Yeah.
But because of, and it wasn't like any of them were such terrible people. Like I read an interview with Jake Lacey, the actor who played Shane, and they were like, so is Shane clearly the worst character? And he was like, well, I guess you can make a case that he did the worst thing since he actually like plunged a knife into someone and killed them. But he's like, maybe I'm just being protective of my character because you have to be empathetic when you play a character and then come to like them more than you should. But he's like, I actually think you can make a case that Paulo was the worst character. And I don't really think any of them were the worst or the best.
Yeah.
They were all fucked up, but also like just so human.
I have a friend who swears by his opinion that Carmela Soprano is the most evil character on The Sopranos, which I can see. I don't know if I agree with it, but this is also the kind of show that brings up certain interesting debates, like, is Mike White a white supremacist? No, but because the show doesn't moralize,
his name is White,
so. And because it doesn't kind of like preclude, paralyze, shut down discussion, you can actually have kind of some interesting poptimistic debates about it.
Well, like the life, right? Like you can have, I mean, that's when art is most interesting, when it can like take actual parts of life and make you think and make you, you know, have doubts about your own initial impressions and reactions and judgments instead of, you know, just having to like digest messaging.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that the Red Scare girls, I've heard a lot of people say that they are less reminiscent of us and of like your average Red Scare listener, but they're also the most non-essential characters. They're sort of like the Greek chorus, like peanut gallery.
Well, no,
in a way,
Paula's very essential
as like
in orchestrating that whole scheme.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
You
with
know.
where she
But do you guys think those would be Red Scare listeners or could be Red Scare listeners?
Well, plausibly, yeah. I mean, I got
so many listeners.
We have so many listeners, and I was
right.
stopped.
It's like every walk of life.
Do you
like,
think Luca Magnotta could be one of our listeners?
I was stopped on my way over here by like a very lovely, young, like, but very normy, like Asian girl who was a fan of the show and told me she was studying for the LSAT, and I was like, wow, good luck.
No, but I could see that.
You
but
don't
I think like the one thing that would preclude somebody from really loving the show is being, like kind of addicted to woke ideology. I think that would be like the one off-putting
be a deal breaker,
attribute. And those girls were kind of that. Like I would almost see those girls reacting like the way that actors actually reacted. And my guess is she's not completely on like her character, which is like, I don't know what that is. I really have nothing to do with that. I'm not sure they would be actual Red Scare listeners.
The other one who played Paula was like, I didn't even understand it. It was like a whole different world. I was like, damn. I was like, must be nice. I was like, I wish I didn't understand it.
Podcasting, yeah. I think.
Oh, I'll also say the drug sequences I thought were very well done, and that's also a very tricky and often corny thing to do. But the way that the like debauched drug use was depicted, I thought was like satisfying and pretty true to my experiences.
Just like hanging out with you guys.
There was nothing like glamour. There is a little glamour to it, right? Or like nobody would do it.
Of course.
So you want to show that part of it, but then it does get like very degraded also. So it's like it's always good at the beginning.
But even just a character on drugs and not having like some kind of like trippy psychedelic generic sequence around it that conveys to the audience that they're on drugs, I thought
do you think like the character with whom Mike White most identified was the gay hotel manager?
I think Jennifer Coolidge. I don't know.
The Tanya person?
I think the Tanya person is probably the most of a proxy for him.
Right, because there was one thing that she said that like just stuck so much with me was when she was telling Belinda why she didn't want to invest in her business, and she said, the last thing I need in my life is another transactional friendship where I just use my money to manipulate and control people. My guess is that like anybody who has money or success of that kind has that experience where you have to avoid the temptation not to only seek out friendships and relationships that are based in the power that you can have over somebody, because then it kind of corrupts the friendship. Even though you can like create the facade of a friendship, like it's not, you're not actually letting yourself be vulnerable in the way you would need to be to connect to somebody.
Well, I mean, that's the scary. I think about this a lot now because, like, when you're in a position where you have people approaching you who like think you're like cool or influential in some way, it's actually a very empty feeling, because the only thing worse than being in a subservient position is being in a dominant position. And and having the forethought that you could actually have some control over people because you have some level of influence or money or power. I mean, that whole dynamic has always been completely disgusting and scary to me.
Well, that's master-slave dialectics, babe. That's the master needs the slave, and the master is the one who's really scared.
Yeah.
Right, and all like those two roles it's always hard to know like exactly who's in which position. But I think that was like probably the central theme of the show, at least for me. Maybe it's just because of my own experience. I'm imposing like my own experiential framework on it. But I think because it's so tempting to, in this world where like if you are vulnerable in those vulnerable moments, that you can be more hurt by definition, to try and always avoid being vulnerable. And one way to avoid being vulnerable is to only have relationships that you can actually control, where the person needs something from you and you're giving something, and therefore it gives you power in the relationship, and you can like delude yourself into thinking that that's a friendship or that's love. And it's a very tempting, situation because you can get things that you want and you think you're getting them when in reality you're protecting yourself the whole time. You're just like using your money or your influence or your leverage or whatever to force people to be in a play where it all is like enacted in a way that gives you what you want without you actually having to open yourself up in a way to actually get it. So you can say like, it scares me, I don't want to be it.
Yeah. And it's all in service of an ego that's ultimately very, very fragile.
Yeah.
So it's like when that dynamic kind of rips, it's like paper thin.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and people also don't appreciate ever when, especially, you know, in kind of like leftist circles, when they talk about power, for example, power is not just influence or advantage. It's also a great deal of responsibility that's often very burdensome and unpleasant to shoulder if you're wielding it responsibly.
Being a podcaster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Heavy is the head that records the pod, man.
I'm super happy I got to talk to you about that show because, for me, the
I'm so glad
thing was
you
like
liked
a distraction.
it. Yeah,
I loved it. I really loved it. I already liked Mike White because there were like from the Survivor thing, like there was this. He was just so funny and snotty and he was just like kind of above it all and yet also playing. So I was already predisposed to just like it and assume that anything that he created would be interesting, but I wasn't sure if given it was HBO that it would actually get through those filters in the way that it did.
Have you watched Enlightened?
No, but I've been told that I should.
You probably would really like it.
Is this the Laura Dern? I want to watch Enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
That's a movie though.
No,
or
it's a TV show.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Sick.
He's got humble indie roots just like me, so we've got a lot in common. We're both survivors. Well, thanks for coming on, Glenn.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up. Dasha doesn't like going past an hour and 30 minutes.
No,
and it's totally true. Like Anna wants to always keep going, and Dasha's like, no,
that's
I think
not
we've done a minute and 10 minutes. Your eye's always on the clock, and then you're like, no, I think it's time to wrap up. And then Anna talks for like 8 or 9 more minutes, and then you're like, see you in hell.
Yeah,
so she's recording. Yeah,
I'm the audio engineer, so
editor.
I'm keeping track of the time. But we're both aligned in keeping it at a 90-minute roughly.
I know. I don't mean to like drive a wedge between the two.
This is just like a myth. No, but
well, I'm gay, so I'm always looking for like the drama and the conflict and the like operatic, war that's going on underneath the like surface between you two.
Glenn, she's the sound engineer. I'm the editor, so the shorter the better for me because it's less stuff that I have to listen to because I'm going through these things with like a fine-tooth comb. Just kidding.
Exactly. We are.
So you guys run Red Scare like a collective. Like you were a model that Nathan J. Robinson could have followed.
Literally.
Had he not been such a tyrant.
Well, we're incorporated. We're a corporation, and we're on the board of directors.
Yeah.
So we
have some like really retarded
of the board.
We both are.
Is that? I think. Sweet. I think maybe I'm the chairman and you're the secretary. It sounds really Soviet.
Yeah.
I'm the secretary because I'm a bottom.
It is interesting because you are sitting on the floor like
I usually do.
I usually do on the couch.
I've been sitting on the couch more lately, but I like to sit on the floor. It's Lindy.
All right, well, I feel good. I feel like being a guest on your show is like a huge responsibility because it's like, you know, when you have a show that you love and then like some person intrudes, that person can generate a lot of resentment. So you feel like you have to not be annoying when you come on the show. So I do feel like it's a big responsibility.
You're always welcome, and it was great to talk to you.
Always good to see you guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
I'll see you.
Bye.